Hello, how's everybody doing tonight on this magnificent whatever time it is for you? Today we have a joint release album review. Went a little bit under the radar. It's by Apollo Brown and Locksmith, no question. Apollo Brown from the indie music label Mellow Music Group, straight out of Arizona, produced this album with one track being co-produced by DJ Los. And Locksmith is actually the rapper that's rapping on all 8 of these tracks. I've actually known about Apollo Brown for quite some time after his release in 2015, I think it was, with the album Grandeur. And then since then I've dug back into his catalog to Trophies? No, Clouds was before that, so I think that was like 2011 or something. Locksmith, on the other hand, I haven't listened to much. I remember listening to his album 1,000 Cuts when that came out back in 2014 when Funk Volume was still a thing. And after that, I think he had an album where he worked with Jaron Benton, somebody else from Funk Volume. And he's come out with a few records after that, and most recently he came out with, well, before this, he came out with the record Olive Branch. That was last year, and I thought it was a pretty decent record. And it's a little more trap influenced than this record, produced by Apollo Brown. But enough of me blabbering out about this. Let's get right into the record. First track, Just Ask, is under a minute long, and it's a pretty instrumental with some pianos that kind of sets you up for the first actual track on the album, which is Advice for My Younger Self. On this track, Locksmith pens a letter. On this track, Locksmith kind of pens a letter to his old self, which I think also serves the purpose to send a message to those of us carving out our own futures. On here, Locksmith raps about how our own visions of grandeur can be as strong as any sort of drug to stay aware of our decisions, the decisions that we make, and their future repercussions, and that even trust itself can be a vice, something that you should dispense with caution. The production is actually very reflective, and it gives you that hint of nostalgia that Locksmith matches with his lyrics on this. There's some really airy drums on this, a moody piano loop, some vocal samples or additions of kids laughing as you make your way to the chorus, pushed back into the mix with some added brass. Altogether, I think that Apollo and Locksmith really do work well together on this track. No Question finds Apollo back in his typical groove with some hard-hitting boom-bap drums, as always. There's some melodic keys on this thing and some horns or string instruments that play back and forth with one another. And there's a female vocal section on here that plays a big part on the chorus, some back and forth between Locksmith, and it brings some livelihood to the head-bobbing groove on this track. Locksmith takes point rapping about the religious discrimination that he faced in his youth while trying to be open-minded but not receiving that same respect. In his second verse, we get some lyrics about the current state of hip-hop, where Locksmith raps about how rappers these days imitate one another instead of being themselves. Something Locksmith intends to do, that is being himself, as articulated by the chorus on this thing. Alright, so on the fourth track of this album, we get another beat loop, and this is something that Apollo Brown's kind of notorious for. So there's a lot of beat loops. This one's made up of a saxophone with some those hard-hitting boom-bap drums that Apollo seems to love and carry with him on everything that he makes. There's an added groovy bass line to this that I think complements the saxophone quite nicely. Locksmith raps about, being infatuated with hip-hop at a young age, not seeing a path in life because of his social situation or position in school that affected his mental health and behavior, and taking influences from some of the rappers that he respects, like Tupac, Biggie, and the Wu-Tang Clan. in trying to carry on that tradition in hip hop when it seems that most rappers promote most rappers. This is like my third take, just trying to get this sentence right. Most rappers promote little lyrical talent, drugs, and sex. Litmus! Locksmith spits an almost 3-minute long freestyle on this thing. Well, I mean, at least it seems like a freestyle. It's really just one long verse. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's one verse. It's almost 3 minutes long for the entirety of this track, the 5th track on here. He shows off some lyrical ability while speaking quite straightforwardly about being himself, keeping himself real, compared to the other rappers just making music for profit. He says something about your favorite rapper being the face for Viacom, and how other rappers have lost sight of the culture, replacing with their own false sense of worth, or at least that's what I'm getting from this, and other external motivations instead of just pride for the skill that you have and the work that you put into it. Locksmith is, in a way, examining the ways things have changed and acknowledges it, but refuses to become part of the circle, part of the new rising club of rappers that are part of the current state of hip-hop, those current hip-hop expectations. There's a simple beat loop on this thing. I mean, it's Apollo Brown, so even though I wish there were some different change-ups in some of these beats, I mean, I really couldn't have expected anything different. It's made up of some more boom-bap drums, on every single track on this thing. There's some vocal ooh in the background and some piano or guitar additions in the background. Honestly, I don't know what that is. I mean, it sounds pretty decent though. Let me know what that is. It's pretty decent, but there's not really any, bars that kind of went over my head or that really grabbed me in this. Yeah. Slow down. Features some actually quite beautiful layered keys on here, more airy boom bap drums, a dreamy sort of vocal addition going on, and some breezy cymbals that are kind of panning side to side and tickling your ears as you listen to the song. I find that delicate piano and vocal addition a really good fit for this track, seeing as Locksmith is kind of talking about meeting a girl that carries false assumptions about him based off her past experiences that she had with other men. And Locksmith kind of takes this and turns it around and kind of gives you the lesson that, well, slow down, girl. I've also had these experiences, and the best takeaway you can get from this is that you can't really judge a book by its cover. Love, which I like how he kind of makes this comparison here, even though it's not that crazy of it's not something I've never heard before, but he says love is an investment, so slow down, girl. Be cool. This might just work out. This album is only 23 minutes long, so kind of comparable to these 7-track albums that Kanye's been putting out. I mean, honestly, the first track on here is only 44 seconds long and could have just been part of the second track on here, so this is basically a 7-track album. But by the time I got to the 6th track, I really wanted to hear something a little bit different than these New York boom bap beat loops that Apollo Brown is addicted to. But yet again, we get another one. There's some assaulting drums on this, and a piano making up the majority of the mix here, and some soft vocals going on in the background. Locksmith starts by acknowledging the discrimination and the things he's had to deal with while trying to make something of himself, which continues into the second verse, where he goes a little bit deeper into some of those problems he's had, those personal trials and tasks that have tested him in life, like the death of his mother and his grandmother. The bridge and the chorus actually work really well together, I think, with some old school disc scratching going on in the chorus. Overall, I think this is one of the better tracks on the album, even though it's just some more beat loops. Seventh beat loop of the day here. I don't even know if that's what they're called. If somebody knows what they're actually called, if there's a different name for just like the same 5 seconds repeating themselves over and over again, let me know. But out of all of them, I think that this is one of the better ones on here. And I think it really gets across the feeling of return that Locksmith was trying to get across, and shows that he is, in fact, in his element on this track, at least more so than some of the other tracks here. We're finally here at the last track of this eight-track album. And the last song here is entitled Wake Up, which I'm glad there's a reminder here for me to wake up, because all these beat loops, man. There's so many of them, I almost did fall asleep. But it has some real feel-good, summery, pushed-back guitars, hard-hitting claps, and a beautiful piano or something with an effect on it going on that makes you just kind of want to go out for a drive. The song has a real feel-good vibe to it. It has a vibe to it. I'm sorry. And it's solidified by the believe in yourself despite the odds lyrics that Locksmith showers onto this thing after all the substance that was on the previous 7 tracks on this album. It's honestly a decent closer, but I wish there was just a little bit more energy when it came to the chorus on this thing. I feel like Locksmith's voice is just so gritty, and after 8 tracks with no features, it could just get a little bit monotonous, especially since the production on here is just full of beat loops. So even if he does change his flow, it's not really too noticeable. I've been listening to his voice already for 20 minutes. Would it be too much to ask for a feature on this track, especially because there was so much potential on this thing? It does catch the summer vibe. It does make you want to go out for a drive or something like that. But you know, when it came to the chorus, when everybody should go and sing along to this thing, it's just disappointing a little bit. If you guys haven't heard or listened to any of Apollo Brown's previous projects, then I would definitely recommend you go do it. He definitely has a lot of great tracks when it comes to albums like Trophies, or even Clouds is a good listen. Grandure's a pretty decent album. But honestly, this just sounds like the beats he didn't use on Grandeur and just kind of gave them to Locksmith and told him to make it work. This album, if you're listening to it one take all the way through, it just feels like the same thing over and over again. Honestly, it became hard to make a distinction of if he was even changing the drum patterns on each of these tracks. It just sounded like the same New York boom bap, gold school boom bap drums on this thing every single time the next track came on, which is a shame because the initial 2 tracks combined, it started real beautiful and nice, and I was actually kind of excited. It was a beat loop, but it didn't really seem like a beat loop. And then right when we start getting into the tracks after that, there was just beat loop after beat loop after beat loop, and then a freestyle, which kind of, or 3-minute long verse, which kind of broke the monotony. But there was just more beat loops. There were really no bars that hit me on this. The writing's good. He's able to get a story across, and a lot of this stuff is relatable, and there was some smart writing on this, but there was no bars. There was nothing that really went over my head and made me think like, yes, this hasn't been said before, and it's crazy good. The highlights on this album for me are Advice to My Younger Self, which really started off the album well, I think. In My Element's really good. I just love scratching, and it did it really well on here on this track when it came to the chorus. And Slow Down and Wake Up, they're not amazing tracks. I wish there could have been a little bit more done there, but I think if you threw it on, you could still probably jam to it. It just seems like they reused the same template for every song, and it just makes Locksmith's ability to tell a story a little character deprived. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this album a 4 out of 10, just because Apollo Brown has been around for so long at this point, and just to have these instrumentals that sound like they came straight off of Grandeur, I just want to see something different, honestly, after all these years listening to Apollo Brown, and this is just so middle of the road. That's it. If you enjoyed what you have heard tonight, ladies and gentlemen, whoever, whatever you are, leave a like, comment below, tell me if I'm wrong, tell me what you like. Did you even listen to this thing? I don't think anybody did besides me, to be honest. I am going to find a mixtape to review on Monday. Hopefully, it's not trash, but if it is trash, we'll have fun trashing it. Peace.